the idea, like what the average everyday person's idea of an artist impacts how real artists are treated. It's pretty much kind of like how you would deal with, like, I don't know, like misogyny, right? Like a coworker comes to me and they're like, "Why aren't you smiling more? Isn't that like in your nature to do this or that or the other thing?" You know what I mean? It's like they believe just because you are something, that's it, and that there's no intersections or whatever. So because you're an artist, you must be cool and chill and like totally down to do this project because like it's for the, like, you know, they use buzzwords. They're like, it's for the culture, it's for the community, it's the exposure, it's priceless. Art is priceless, but priceless doesn't pay for the bills, you know?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Current Art Podcast. I'm Yaqing, and today we have a special guest. Her name is Kara Fan.
I am US born, Chinese American. I was born and raised in New Jersey, and my mom immigrated to New York City in the 80s, and my dad immigrated somewhere outside of Baltimore in the 70s. And now I am currently based in Elmhurst, which is where my mom's family settled. And I am a creative laborer. Something, a new term that I happened across, but I do, set building and set dressing and all these other things. That's what I do for money as an artist. And yeah, and was a guaranteed income participant for Creators Rebuild New York, which is how we are linked, as a part of the Artist Power Building School Fellowship.
That's a great introduction. And this talk is actually supported by Creative Rebuild New York. It's a fantastic organization that support like over 2,000 artists for 2 years, and they pay each artist $1,000 a month, like non-strain payment. And what is great about this program, I think, is they didn't ask artists to necessarily have to present any results of this guaranteed income, and really take the stress off the shoulder. And I think the most important thing was they really offset the balance of the paying disparity in creative industry. Yeah, and money is a very exciting topic. So what was your experience like? Like, what was your first reaction when you heard or when you received the notification that you were being selected to receive $1,000 for consecutively 18 months?
I was really shocked that I got it, but this was a really interesting, it was a really interesting application because it didn't require portfolio. You really just had to write about how you are a culture maker and what you would do with this money. And I just luckily heard it from a friend at the time who suggested that I applied for it. And, at that point I had nothing to lose because this is now, like 2 years into the pandemic. And I think the unemployment was running out. So for me, this was an incredible opportunity, to like build my savings back up and keep my studio and just kind of felt more free to share that in that by, share that money by like going out, experiencing like different shows and different things. I called it like my culture girly era because it was just a really nice, I don't want to, yeah, like a gift. It didn't feel real. It was really nice that someone like put in all that money to support artists, but it's interesting to me that like it's not, we have to find a way to make it sustainable. Being an artist is a well-paid job if you know the right people, and also if your practice operates in a way that leads you to that kind of success. I guess to me it depends on what that is for you as an artist. And I feel like for me, the value and role of an artist changed very drastically and very fast when I got to school. Essentially, I decided at a very young age that I wanted to be an artist because I grew up in an environment where I was supported to, do what you want to do. I mean, I feel like the whole rhetoric that was pushed to us as children was like, oh, like you can be what you want to be as long as you work hard and apply yourself and da da da. It's a very American attitude, but I mean, like, obviously there's caveats. Obviously there's like, differences among different communities, and it's not like my parents didn't try to dissuade me from pursuing something like this, but it's like they didn't know what being a creative professional meant, and I certainly had no idea what being a creative professional meant. I thought it just meant like, people know your name, you get to be in museums, and you'll make money out doing that. Like, hooray. Like, very simple, very low bar idea. Like, I grew up in a really, I don't want to say it was really small. There's far smaller towns out there, but I grew up in like a smaller suburb of New Jersey where, I thought that, oh, once I get out of this place where people don't understand this or that, like, I'll find my way because it's out there. And, I wasn't unfamiliar with the city and stuff. I figured maybe I would make it one way or another by finding like a teaching job or something like this or that or the other thing, whatever. But, yeah, definitely got a huge reality check at art school for sure. I went to RISD, and that was a huge wake-up call. That's where I learned art making is really, really expensive. Very expensive. I learned that some artists don't even need to make their own art. I learned that I don't know if I learned it, but I became very confused about what the value of art was, I suppose. And I couldn't find any opportunities in Rhode Island. So then I just ended up coming back to the tri-state area. I had some internship connections that helped me get some work out of school in different fabrication shops and some little commercial sets here and there, and I've just kind of been gigging, making it work since then, with not really a lot of time or space to do my own art, but I, was always working so that I could eventually get back to a spot where I could make something that I was actually passionate about before, having to go back to the grind and do a job again.
I can understand that, like freelance job to freelance job, it is not easy because that requires you also to constantly networking and sell yourself, sell your works,
and price yourself, and but like also pricing yourself, thinking about like how the other guy is doing it, it creates this really I don't want to say hostile, but very unstable environment and insecure place for an artist to exist in.
I like when you use the word insecure. It's a very accurate word. Part of the reason I think is because we live in this society, we come to this society, we want to be supported by our environment. And we also wanted to know, well, what we are doing, the artwork we are making, is actually bring certain value because in the long term it does. But for so many emerging young artists, they need the soil to grow. And if we're just giving like such a poor condition, like who will do all those experimental work, and also who will stand up to challenge the social norms and challenge the inequality and disparity in our society. And I think it's very important that the young people are being supported. They're being supported at first by their environment.
Everyone can do arts. Not everyone wants to be an artist, but that doesn't mean like, there has to be that narrative of like artists need to suffer that I think is very pervasive in how people value arts and treat artists, and also, kind of, I feel like makes Americans fine with just, not wanting to support artists. Creators Rebuild New York was a private effort that was inspired by a federal arts program. CETA stands for the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. And so it was a program that was supposed to just give people government jobs, but then some random intern found a way to include artists as a part of that program. So then 10,000 artists across the United States were given a salary of, $45,000 a year. But the difference was like their program, they had to like have a portfolio or audition for it, and the nonprofit that they were paired with was not given any funds. So that actually caused a lot of issues sometimes, and had programs not able to continue, or like just things didn't work out simply because like they weren't given any additional funds for materials. So that's what I find interesting. That detail I find very interesting, because there's always room for improvement. And also before CETA, even there was the WPA, which employed artists. This is like, I think like around like World War I or something like that. So it's funny that there's been this pattern where every 50 years the conditions are down so bad that they're like, okay, I guess like we should just fund artists. And like the only reason why CETA didn't continue is because Reagan became president. So then that was just kind of taken away. And yeah, now we're here.
So there's like a historical timeline that showed we are in this country actually able to afford such a program to help artists to create their works, like also to create a cultural space. If you think about like if you go on the street, that if everything is contribute to capitalism, if everything that is just thinking about practical reasons of existing in the city, like how our life would be like. I think New York, it's not New York without artists.
Oh, for sure. And the way that the city is going right now really is a huge slap to the face to not just artists, but just pretty much like every poor person. There was this really interesting quote in the film The Federal Artist. Great film, also available for free on YouTube. The Federal Artist is a documentary that was also created by CETA artists. Mark Levin, who was a part of this media team that was put together by CETA to just like go out and like document all of the projects that were happening during this program. And so, yeah, the guy, Mark Levin, now has this like production company called Blowback Productions. And he's also made another film called It's Basic that has documented different guaranteed income programs throughout the United States. Because, I mean, it really didn't end with CETA. There have been, for a couple decades now, you know, lots of pilot programs that exist that target very specific groups. You know, there's a lot of programs for homeless people or houseless programs for houseless people. There are programs for families, you know, and they happen everywhere. Like, it's not the artist that's exploited, it's the poor people that are exploited, is what someone said about how the government, like, kind of isn't, when the government, like, pulls back on programs and stuff that, like, feed the culture and, like, make sure people's basic needs are met and all of that. Which is definitely, like, the trend that we see, like, post-Reagan, just, like, a huge rollback on, like, government support, a huge rollback on supporting unions, and we can really see and feel the effects of that kind of administration today. Like, there's no regulation right now when it comes to how technology impacts our labor force. There seems to be no boundaries when it comes to trying to make it as a young creative. And the only person that it hurts at the end of the day is, you know, us low-income artists, because we can't continue to rely on, you know, people with these flimsy promises you know, it's even like, sometimes it's even like our friends, our collaborators just doing their best, right? They're also not being given the proper support to properly pay for the labor of they're very talented people too. It becomes us having to just rely on the richest people when that's not, you know, that's not how it should be. I mean, historically, sure, you could argue that arts was always funded by rich people and the church, like people with money, but now we're living in a time where art is incredibly democratized and like education is so readily available. I mean, you know, I feel like we can see in the policies that are being presented to our current government that, you know, those restrictions around that are tightening because, you know, like we're, you know, like we don't want workers with thought. We just want like happy slaves to like continue to uphold the status quo. But, you know, that's only going to last for so long.
In the beginning of the episode, you said you are like a creative labor. Like, is that because of the long term that you feel like, oh, I haven't been paid enough? Is that a like conclusion of the reality of being an artist in the United States?
I would say that when I describe myself as a creative laborer, like, you know, not only do I build the thing, right? Like, people, hire creative professionals because they, they allegedly have a skill that the employer wants from you, right? But then at the end of the day, like, there is this disconnect in society, I feel, that doesn't think of being creative as labor. Like, they're just like, oh, you were born with it. Oh, you know what you're doing. This must be so easy for you. But that's not how art works. Like, art, like, it is labor. Creating something is labor. Of course you can have fun while you do it. Of course you can enjoy yourself while you're doing it, but it doesn't mean that you're not exhausting yourself. It doesn't mean that you're not tired. It doesn't mean you're not a human being that needs rest or time away from the thing to then maybe come back and make it better. I feel like it becomes very, it's not that, and it's not that I'm not trying to limit, what being creative is, but at the same time, like, creativity produces something tangible in reality, right? So to get from point A to point B, you need to put in labor, you need to put in work. I don't make the rules, that's just the reality of it, you know?
I think what you're talking about is very interesting because you're talking about to break down this like bubble-like stereotype about how people think creative people works, you know? It's actually about like this romantic fantasy of artists that didn't invest much. They are just born with the talents they have, and therefore their work or their creative path, their creative career hasn't been like regarded in the same way as other jobs in the society.
The idea, like, what the average everyday person's idea of an artist impacts how real artists are treated. It's pretty much kind of like how you would deal with, like, I don't know, like misogyny, right? Like, a coworker comes to me and they're like, "Why aren't you smiling more? Isn't that like in your nature to do this or that or the other thing?" You know what I mean? It's like they believe just because you are something, that's it, and that there's no intersections or whatever. So because you're an artist, you must be cool and chill and like totally down to do this project because like it's for the, like, they use buzzwords. They're like, it's for the culture, it's for the community, it's the exposure, it's priceless. Art is priceless, but priceless doesn't pay for the bills, And what is so interesting about being in this program is getting a chance to meet artists of like all ages, right? There are artists like younger, like I'm 29 now. I was born in 95. Like, artists younger than us struggling. But even artists that like have all these accolades, awards, multiple degrees, they're still also in this program because clearly, like, the way that the artist is valued, well, it like, if there is not a societal shift onto what the artist's role and value is, artists will just continue to suffer, and like we cannot continue to leave people behind simply because they do something or pursue something that the market doesn't find valuable. And that's kind of what governments are supposed to be for. They're not here for the market. Governments are here to be for the people. They're supposed to be there to ensure that like people don't get taken advantage of, that they are supported, that they are safe. You know, that's what I pay my taxes for. Like, you know, those are the ideas that, like, you know, were brought up and instilled into us, and yet when we look out into the world and we look outside, it's not the same. There's this misalignment. And I really felt that, like, super heavily during the pandemic, you know, like the way that you know, work became so much more scarce. Like, I am at a worse place now than I was when I graduated from school in 2017. Like, the wages are so much worse. It's not keeping up with inflation.
I really like what you're saying about the rest in society, because I think it comes down to one question. It's like, do we want to turn everybody into working machines? It's like, is this what we are asking in our society? Or what we are actually asking for is, are we producing values for our community? And this producing the value doesn't mean something that it can mean so many things. It doesn't have one specific standard. It creates a good environment for our children to grow. It's like a productive act, like building community gardens and organizing cultural events. Those are all very valuable things. And those are the things that we need to come together, create different kind of working dynamic, but not like everybody is like sitting in front of the computer and then working 8 hours, 12 hours a day. It's kind of need us to, you know, find space and then come together to have a meeting, to create space to breathe. That's how I understand what is being actually productive. It's not always working for big companies, but it's actually what can you do to bring the values really direct to your communities.
Yeah, I agree. You know, health is wealth, right? Like, it's our idea of what, like, we've just become, to be really blunt, very money hungry, right? But it's because we need money, right? And, you know, that just breeds this kind of, like, unhealthy system where we cannot take care of ourselves because we just need to survive, bottom line. And the way, it's just, like, so funny to me that the 8-hour workday came from America, because now we're kind of fighting to have, like, just, like, 10-hour workdays. Like, 12-hour workday is, like, seen as normal, and it shouldn't be. Like, when you're constantly working, you're too drained to do anything else. And so having, you know, someone has said to me that money can be seen as an energy exchange, right? Like, as much as I don't want to be ruled by money, money is a tool. Money is a tool that gets you resources, because, like, it, you know, that it's just what we have to, you know, I guess, see value. But then at the same time, then there's the pitfall of, like, oh, the value has to make money too, right? And it's like, no, there is so much value in having creative spaces, restful spaces, like what you listed off, gardens and community centers and things like that. But, you know, we're living in a world where people are fine with those things being taken away because they're being fed these ideas that we have to operate or see each other in these kinds of monetary ways. Yeah, I mean, like that quote I gave, it is like it's a war against poor people, like because it's so ingrained in us that like, you know, a person's wealth reflects their morality. I mean, that's kind of why we see so many people supporting someone like Trump. They just assume, oh, he has so much money. He must be so smart. He must be so good at like his job and what he does and blah, blah, blah. You know? Like the way that American mythology exists makes the average person believe that they're more aligned with a millionaire than with their neighbor because they think, oh, well, they're not working hard enough or they're not doing this or that. And that's why but I'm different. I work so hard. It just keeps you in this like mental trap and also like, you know, makes you just feel bad about yourself because you're in this space where, hey, I'm still struggling. So that must mean I'm doing something wrong because people would just be giving me money if I'm doing something right. And that's just not the reality of life at all.
I think when I'm in the midst of struggle or finding myself not being supported, I always find very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I felt that, I think many younger people, like who wasn't having great connections or who just starting up, might also feel that way.
And it is true, you know, like I also share those same sentiments. Like when I was younger, like I did feel very alone and sad about, you know, like I felt like really lost, like because I wasn't doing work on my own art. I was like, oh my God, does that even make me an artist? You know, there's all these like really toxic thoughts and feelings. Like, oh, if I'm like, I'm not creating art, but I'm not in a space where I can create art. And yet, you know, I'm seeing like other people around me being able to do that and this or that. It makes you question a lot of things. And then like, you know, you just have to realize that like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, but I mean, you know, that I think that's also what Creatives Rebuild New York helped me see too, is that artists have always existed outside of the stereotypical gallery scene and stuff, right? There have always been people that are carving their own path. It's like they just might not be as visible because of resources. Yeah.
It's like a really great way to put it. So I have a question for you. So if with now your understanding about artist career path, artist career choice, if you would go back 5 years ago to yourself and then to give yourself a little tip, a little notes, like what would you tell that person who's just starting out?
I would tell that person, know your rights. I would say know your rights. I really would say that it's illegal to work more than 16 hours a day. Because I was put in a lot of really compromising positions because I just thought that that's what you had to do to work and to make it. You know, I developed this really unhealthy work habit of, you know, doing all-nighters and stuff at art school because I was making my art for myself and I was like, you know, obviously I'm always wanting more time, but, you know, it's just kind of like when you're able to transfer that if not able, like when you're encouraged to transfer this unhealthy habit into work, that's where it all goes downhill from there. And I wish I could have told myself to prioritize my rest more because I think, you know, when you're young, when you're young, there's just this pressure to make it because that's the most prime time, the most fertile time. Like no one cares. Like, you know, I'm very happy I've let go of that. You know, I want to say like sure, maybe I haven't fully let go of that idea, but I would say that I am more comfortable with it now. But I wish that when I was younger, I wasn't afraid to value myself. It's just that there is the reality that, like, well, if you, those opportunities to be able to, you know, be charge yourself more, like, it's really tenuous. I really do wish that there were better resources available for me as a young artist to, like, really know how to stand up for myself. And it's not that I haven't found mentors that encourage me to stand up for myself or have told me little bits of this or that along the way. Um,
I think you're saying a very
yeah,
important thing. Um, you're talking about, at first, the artists should not exploit themselves. At the very beginning, you have to
yeah,
find a working schedule that is sustainable to last. That you have to find a working methodology that not inspire other employer to further exploit artists.
yes. And it just sucks because you are competing with other people that are willing to take on that stuff. But I think that as artists, when we become more united in what we accept as our conditions, then things will just inevitably get better. I mean, you can see that the way that entertainment industries are moving, that they are trying to cut more and more artists out of labor because they don't want people to standing up and causing a fuss and saying, actually, like, you can't do that in that timeline. They want to be able to cut corners, but, at the end of the day, you can see the difference. And I think we are on the right side of history on this one.
Yeah, I think we need a union. But also to
Ah!
teach young people about those legal issues when they first come to find their jobs, for example.
Mm-hmm. Like, New York does have the freelancers union. I don't really know much about, like, their dues and things like that. And, I think that, I mean, the freelance laws in New York are great where you don't, even if you're not in the union, it's kind of like there are a lot of resources out there that are available to help you find, like, healthcare and all these other things like that I'm more than happy to compile a list at some point to share, because I do have those links in my head. But it is just about, like, really getting everyone on the same page about how they should value themselves and how they should value their art, because, like, yeah, moving forward together is what's best for the rest,
I think this
for
is a
sure.
very beautiful ending for our recording. And I appreciate Creative Review New York to support us to do this episode. Yeah.
Yes.
And thank you
Fab.
for sharing a lot of your personal experience, and thank you for sharing a lot of tips, the things that you learned along, and your reflections about being an artist. I really appreciate that.
Oh my gosh. Oh, thank you for having me on, and all with the preface of I'm still very much figuring it out, but I really appreciate you having this platform to, for us to share our journeys. And I very much look forward to continuing to build that with you and the others.
Okay. Thank you so much for watching today and listening. So, this is only the first episode of our Creative New York Review Journey and Guaranteed Income Month, actually, for in my podcast. So, anyway, so I'm available every Sunday on YouTube Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Pocket Podcasts. Thank you so much for supporting, and see you next week. Ciao, ciao. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.